Growing up in Detroit, Motown was everywhere. Years later, we went back to Detroit to see where the music had come from. We won't be playing any Motown music in this video because it's copyrighted, and they asked us not to videotape inside the studio. Berry Gordy ended up buying 6 buildings on Grand Boulevard to house his growing business. Motown was started originally from a loan of $800, and it was called Tamla when it started out. He had a number of different labels that he used. Mostly, the one the most famous was Motown. You can do a guided tour of the studio and the house where Berry Gordy actually lived, upstairs from the studio. Here's Berry Gordy. He later moved to Los Angeles in 1972 with his business. Here's our tour guide. Here's the progression as it moved from 1 house to 2 houses to ultimately 6 in a row on Grand Boulevard. Here's the actual loan document that started Motown. This is an echo chamber that they used to produce reverb, and it was just a sort of a space in the roof. The appearance of the artists was very important to Claudette Robinson, and she spent a lot of time making sure everybody presented themselves well. Here's the hat and glove used by Michael Jackson, which he donated to them. Motown was not the only label that Berry Gordy used in his business. And you can see there that there was Motown, Tamla was the original one. This is where Berry Gordy and his family lived, and they've saved this as a sort of museum as well. It's interesting to see the dated furniture and furnishings. What's particularly cool is the record player. You can imagine Berry Gordy sitting and listening to actual records that they had just pressed downstairs. They preserved a lot of the equipment that they used in their business, such as this typewriter and the phones and a bunch of other type of office furniture. Anna wanted to touch everything, but that was not allowed. Here's a cigarette machine and a switchboard preserved from those starting days, and a candy machine. Motown produced 110 top 10 hits, and the first gold record was Shop Around by the Miracles. Employees actually punched a time clock. Berry Gordy reputedly ran the studio 24 hours a day. You can imagine the huge amount of tapes that generated. A lot of the original equipment is still there, like this this tape recorder. Here's the actual entrance to the studio. This is where the music was actually recorded. All those songs, all those years ago. The actual recording studio room is not very large by modern standards. Here's a photo they had of Smokey Robinson at the console. And the actual console is still there, more or less. There it is. You can see where the floor is worn out, where people were stomping their feet. The actual console was a modified Western Electric console, and there were 2 Altec audio mixers in a rack. The way they originally recorded was to have 1 track rhythm, that is to say bass and drums, 1 track vocals, and in another track what they called sweeteners, that is to say violins or strings or horns. This is part of the tour where you get to actually see the piano that was used in the recordings. Later, Paul McCartney came through here and discovered it was unplayable, so he financed the restoration of this piano, and it could still be played. To put this in perspective, here's a shot of Peter Gabriel's studio in Bath, England. It's amazing how much music came out of the small studio in Motown. This is a guitar that was used by Dennis Coffey and some of the equipment that they used. We were asked not to use videotaping in the studio, so you can't actually hear what happened. But the tour guide insisted that we all sing My Girl. And we did, with more or less success. This gives you a sense of the how crowded it could have been with all the instruments in there. I think any visitor to Detroit is making a mistake not to visit the Motown studios and see where it all started.